there's a growing understanding when we look more directly at what it means to be intimate with each other, what it really means to heal or wake up, that does have to do with disarming. That we're learning to recognize and shed the kind of defensive strategies, the judgments and the preoccupations that we have, and the pretenses that we have that cover over real feelings and that create distance. And it's challenging because each one of us has pretty much the same core fear that we'll be rejected for who we are, that there's something inherently flawed or rejectable there. And so we keep our armoring on, and it's kind of difficult to let it go. And yet we at the same time intuit that it's not unless we let go of it that we'll really be free, that we'll really be happy. My very number one favorite book as a child was Wrinkle in Time. How many of you had also liked Wrinkle in Time? A whole lot of us, yeah. So I was reading about the kind of the history a little bit of Dangle, I'm not pronouncing it right, Madeleine L'Engle. I'm saying it wrong still. But anyway, she tried to sell the book, and she had 30 rejections before it sold. I think that's amazing. 30 rejections. And so here's what she writes. She says, over the years, I've worked out a philosophy of failure, which I find extraordinarily liberating. She said, if I'm not free to fail, I'm not free to take risks, and everything in life that's worth doing involves a willingness to risk failure. She says, this is what's true in all human relationships. Unless I'm willing to open myself to risks and to being hurt, then I'm closing myself off to love and friendship. So we might agree that it's more evolved to begin to take off the scales and be vulnerable, to be less defended. But we can't will it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to drop all my strategies for looking good. And all that we can do really is deepen our attention because we care about being more free. So this is where meditation comes in. We can begin to develop a capacity for an undefended heart by deepening our attention. And I'll read you one of the most well-known of all of Rilke's writings. He says, perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. So my sense is that for us, one of the most revealing kind of clusters of questions we can ask are, do I recognize my skills? I mean, am I on to my own ways of protecting vulnerability? And we'll go over some of the ways we do it, but am I on to that? Am I aware of it? And also the question of, when my vulnerability does arise, how do I relate to it? What happens when you start really feeling that sense of exposed, uncertain, shaky, in danger, a risk? How do you do that? So do we see our scales? What happens when the vulnerability starts coming? And for each of us, what's the way that we can begin in a very compassionate, wise kind of way to disarm? What's our way? Where in your life right now is it possible to meet your edge and soften a little bit more? So the key here is to be in a wise relationship with vulnerability and get that it's not so personal, that not to blame ourselves for how we feel, and to understand that our defenses, while they make sense at some stages of development, they become a habit, and then they become not so useful. And so we begin to understand that the defended isn't safe. And that's a deep understanding. That we might be defended and in some way comfortable because we've got our armoring up and people aren't really seeing what we're feeling, or we're not speaking our truth, or in some way we're defended for the moment, but we're not safe because inside there's still that fear that if I wasn't defended, I'd be in trouble. So we still live biologically with that hum of fear. It's possible to be free. It is possible to live with an undefended heart. And this is the exquisitely beautiful promise we get in every mystical tradition. It's possible to be free. We don't have to stay identified as the armored dragon.